The next, Deputy Scott.
Sir, in light of the decision regarding Deputy Farnham's proposition, I've decided to defer my proposition.
Thank you very much. Until when?
Until the next sitting, so it also gives me the opportunity to circulate financial information, which perhaps is easier to do so in writing to the members. And I also could do with some, I'm also in two minds whether to accept the amendment or not when I do bring it.
Thank you very much. Before we commence the next item of public business, and I invite the greffier in a moment to read the citation, I think, Dr. Renner, if you have something to say about the draft Public Health and Safety Rented Dwellings Licensing Jersey regulations.
Yes, sir. Members will be aware that Deputy Luce circulated an email regarding the amendments that had been proposed to this, and pointing out that there are some procedural difficulties with making them all work together. These have proved to be quite significant difficulties, and the fear is that if we proceed with the debate as it is, that it will be essentially pretty chaotic. So the feeling I have, and Deputy Luce has already indicated, is that we should defer this debate to allow time for those amendments to be amended if necessary, to be thought through, and a proper order found for them so that they do not end up being in conflict with each other. It's not an ideal situation, I fully accept that. It's not a situation that any of us would have wanted to find ourselves in here, but I think it is a pragmatic response, and I appreciate the generous acknowledgement from Deputy Luce that the problems arose with some of his amendments, and in that spirit of compromise and goodwill, I would like very much, therefore, to propose a deferment to the next sitting.
Is that seconded?
Yes, sir.
Does any member wish to speak on the proposal that this matter be deferred until the next sitting? Deputy Luce.
Thank you, sir. I'll speak very briefly. As members will know, my scrutiny panel have lodged 9 amendments for the second reading, and as the Minister's already said, it was only when we came to agree the running order of these amendments that we came up against the consequential issues that transpired. The Minister's absolutely right. We want to pass good laws, and if we move ahead today, we will not be doing that. So I would ask the Assembly to support the Minister. Thank you, sir.
Does any other member wish to speak on this proposed deferment? Those in favour of deferring, please kindly show. Thank you very much. Debate is deferred until the next sitting. The next item on the order paper is the draft Sea Fisheries Vessel Monitoring Systems Amendment Jersey Regulations, lodged by the Minister for the Environment. The main respondent is the Chair of the Environment, Housing, Infrastructure Scrutiny Panel. I ask the greffier to read the citation.
Draft Sea Fisheries Vessel Monitoring Systems Amendment Jersey Regulations 2000. The states make these regulations under Articles 2 and 29 of the Sea Fisheries Jersey Law 1994.
Minister.
Thank you, sir. Members will be aware of the complicated negotiations that have been undertaken over the past few years. Firstly, to conclude and then implement the fisheries aspects of the Trade and Cooperation Agreement that came into force following the UK's departure from the EU. I'm pleased to say that the vast majority of that work is now behind us, and we can move forward in managing our marine resources in a sustainable way. The amendment to regulations that I'm bringing to the Assembly today represents a small but important piece of the management jigsaw. The monitoring of fishing activity at sea has always been a part of fisheries management and plays an important part in enforcement and the management of stocks. Historically, this was done using telescopes and binoculars, and then by paper records and onboard inspectors. Nowadays, technology makes the remote monitoring of vessels a possibility. The main purpose of these draft amendments before you today is to ensure that all commercial fishing vessels, whether British or EU or Jersey, are required to install and use equipment capable of reporting that vessel's position at sea. This type of monitoring is not new. Larger vessels, over 12 metres in length, both British and EU, are already required by regulation to have this type of monitoring equipment installed on their vessels. The requirements are set out in the Sea Fisheries Vessels Monitoring Systems Jersey Regulations 2014, the same regulation I'm proposing to amend today. Vessels under 12 metres are currently not required to have or use such equipment, although it should be noted that since 2022, French vessels of all sizes are required to do so, but under French, not Jersey legislation. This amendment will bring forward the same requirements in Jersey legislation and allow for enforcement by our Marine Resources Department when a vessel is operating in Jersey waters. The amendment will therefore be a new requirement for Jersey under 12-metre vessels. As I've said, this Assembly has already agreed to the principle of monitoring in the 2014 regulations, but I believe it is nonetheless important to set out the need for such monitoring. Commercial fishing is a restricted activity, and it is necessary to ensure that only vessels with correct licences and permits are fishing in Jersey waters. This amendment will allow marine resources officers to monitor vessel activity in Jersey waters and take necessary enforcement action when needed. Monitoring is also required to check the time spent at sea fishing in Jersey waters and to check that vessels are not fishing in areas where they are not permitted. For example, since the TCA, certain EU vessels are restricted in the number of days they can fish in Jersey waters, while others cannot operate within defined zones or at certain times of year. This amendment will allow monitoring to be undertaken remotely and in real time, acting as a disincentive to vessels thinking about breaking rules, whilst also greatly assisting with Jersey's monitoring and enforcement. It will also allow for the cross-checking of position with other data, such as logbook declarations, something that is currently difficult to do. At this point, it may help if I provide some context as to why I'm bringing these forward these regulations now. The original decision to go down the route of mandatory tracking originated within the Granville Bay Agreement and discussions with France about making tracking obligatory within the shared waters. This was agreed in outline, but then Brexit intervened. France went on to pass the necessary laws, and we are attempting to do so now. In terms of the bigger picture, however, these regulations should be seen in the context of the move by Western countries to move all fishing vessels onto mandatory tracking. Wales did this in February 2022, and England has been doing it in stages, with completion expected next year. On 20th of October this year, the EU announced mandatory tracking for all its fishing vessels to be established and monitored by member states. We are therefore ensuring that our fishery regulations are in line with, and at least as good as, those from other European countries, but especially those with whom we have fisheries management agreements. Tied in with the above is the need to be able to demonstrate what we are compliant with, what is known as IUU rules. That is, rules on illegal, unreported and unregulated fishing. A demonstration of IUU compliance plays a significant part in our ability to export to the EU and other countries. It is also required to maintain or join certain international management frameworks, such as ICCAT, which relates to potential bluefin tuna fishing. The ability to track vessels is also a major plus, as it means we can trace fish and shellfish from the seabed to the point of sale or export. This last point opens up the door to further eco-labelling opportunities, as traceability is becoming a key requirement for fisheries wishing to be classed as sustainable. So there are good external reasons for this move. We are ensuring that we have a modern, fit-for-purpose fishery that can offer traceability assurances that will doubtless become mandatory within a short time. Ultimately, this amendment is a significant step forward to enable informed and intelligence-led decision-making on local and regional management measures and policies. Another key question in members' minds will be, what is the impact on the fishing fleet? This is clearly important, and as I have already said, larger vessels above 12 metres, both EU and British, already carry this equipment and have done so for some time, so they will experience no change. EU vessels, in our case French vessels under 12 metres, are already required to carry this equipment under their own legislation. For Jersey fishing vessels under 12 metres, there will be a change. The proposed amendments will require a vessel to have on board and use vessel monitoring equipment. The system for Jersey vessels is referred to as Inshore Vessel Monitoring System, or IVMS. It is a local or short-range system that takes advantage of mobile phone networks as opposed to satellite VMS, which gives worldwide coverage but is more expensive to buy, fit and operate and not necessary in our waters. It should be noted that this new requirement will theoretically apply to all British registered fishing boats under 12 metres whilst in Jersey waters, although in practice it's unlikely to be very effective because there are currently no fishing boats registered in other British registries which are licensed to fish in Jersey waters. Nevertheless, any British fishing boat, even if not licensed to fish in Jersey waters, would be required to have monitoring equipment on board and operational while transiting Jersey's waters. The IVMS equipment is easy to use, can report more frequently, and is cheaper to operate than satellite monitoring equipment. The IVMS equipment will be supplied by the Marine Resources Department to Jersey fishing boat owners and fitted at no cost to the fishers. Operational and maintenance costs will also be covered for a period of 2 years. The Jersey fishing fleet is made up mostly of boats which are less than 12 metres in length, and so most Jersey fishermen are going to be affected by the proposal. Marine Resources has already been in discussion with Jersey fishermen, and industry has been notified about the proposal, and the industry understands the benefits from such monitoring and generally support the measure. I think it's probably true to say they're not thrilled, but recognise that it is inevitable and therefore should be taken on board. It's also the case that most boats have already been fitted. At this point, it is worth mentioning who has access to the information on a vessel's location. As some members will know, there are systems, namely AIS, that makes a vessel's position publicly available for all to see. The system we are talking about here, IVMS, is not publicly available and can only be seen by those in government with the clearance and authorisation to do so, namely Marine Resources officers. It is also worth mentioning, therefore, that all requirements under data protection legislation have been complied with respect to the IVMS system and the data generated. May I take this opportunity to thank the Environment, Housing and Infrastructure Scrutiny Panel for taking the time to consider the amendment. And in summary, I hope members will agree that this amendment, if approved, will implement an important measure to further support the management of marine resources in Jersey's waters. I and the Department have sought to minimise the impact, both operational and financial, to the industry, and I urge members to vote for the proposition. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Minister. Are the principles seconded? Yes, sir. Does any member wish to speak on the principles?
Thank you, sir. Just to say that my scrutiny panel took a briefing from officers on this issue and that we're fully supportive of the Minister's intentions. So this is a good management tool and will serve the industry well into the future. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy Scott.
Thank you, sir. I'm very grateful to the Minister for the explanation for the regulations. I just wondered if in his summing up, if he could just expand a little bit on the business about the fishermen not being thrilled, other than perhaps the kind of Big Brother concerns that might generally be in place, whether there was any other reason. Thank you.
I call upon Constable Brillard.
Thank you, sir. Could the Minister, in his summing up, please let members know how many Jersey fishing vessels have actually broken the rules and have been prosecuted in the last few years? Thank you, sir.
I call upon the Minister to reply. Minister.
Thank you, sir. the points that have been raised, I think it's fair to say that fishermen are independent folk and possibly would prefer not to be tracked. However, it's been a feature of the larger boats for a long time, and all French fishing boats are compliant now, and UK boats are following suit in sharp order. I think it is generally accepted that is the case, and that it is therefore best to accept something rather than fight against something that is almost inevitable. It is worth pointing out that there are about 20, I think, vessels that have not yet responded to queries about the fitting of this equipment. And strenuous efforts have been made over a 2-year period now to contact them. Some are thought to be boats that are sitting in fields and not actually being used. Some may be people who do not want to have these fitted. The purpose of these regulations is to make sure that they are fitted in cases of all boats that are actually active. In response to Constable Jackson's question, I'm afraid I don't have data. It's slightly, I think, off topic about the extent to which Jersey fishing boats have been prosecuted in the past. I don't have that data to hand. I'd be happy to answer a written or oral question to that effect. But I think the purpose here is not, this is not about punishment. This is about good practice going forward. As I've said before, in the context of the replacement vessels program, we are in a unique situation and a uniquely positive situation in the sense that we do have better control over our waters now than we've had in generations. And this is an important tool recognized globally. We've done everything that we can to make it easy for fishers to fit the equipment, to operate it. And so I think that really there isn't much reason why we wouldn't want to push ahead and make it mandatory. So I would finish with that and call for the appel, I think.
The appel has been called for. Members are invited to return to their seats. I ask the greffier to open the voting. All members have had the opportunity of casting their votes. I ask the greffier to close the voting. And the principles have been adopted unanimously, 40 votes for. Deputy Luce, I need to ask you, under standing orders, if your panel wish to scrutinise this matter.
We don't, sir, thank you.
Thank you very much. Minister, how do you propose the regulations in second reading?
So I would propose en bloc.
Thank you. Are the regulations seconded? Does any member wish to speak on the regulations in second reading? All those in favour of adopting the regulations in second reading, please kindly show. Thank you very much. The regulations are adopted in second reading. Minister, how do you propose to deal with the regulations in third reading?
So I may maintain the proposition.
Are the regulations seconded in third reading? Does any member wish to speak on the regulations as adopted in second reading? Yes, Deputy Ward.
So just one small thing. You talked about, the Minister, sir, talked about the devices being fitted by government and supported for 2 years. I just want to confirm that there's some evidence that the devices last longer than 2 years, so that we don't have a situation where fishers are reliant upon these devices, but after 2 years they become a very expensive thing to repair. It's a minor detail, could have picked it up in the regulations, but I think third reading is the right place. Thank you, sir.
Does any other member wish to speak in third reading? Yes.
So may I just say, from the external relations point of view, may I just put on record the appreciation to the Minister for his continued work in ensuring that our relations with France, which I know I wasn't here for the remarks he made, but our relations with France are being kept in such good order by such a responsible attitude, of which these regulations are absolutely part of that, and to ensure that we can continue to enjoy local fishing industry, but also in harmony with our French counterparts and French fishers in our waters, and this brings equilibrium, and I'm grateful for the Minister for his work.
I call upon the Minister to reply. Minister.
So yes, I might just provide a little bit more information to members. The system that we're using is a mobile phone-based system. It's very, very simple. The UK's preferred system was units cost over £1,000 each. We found and sourced units which cost £60 each, and which are now, that we understand that several other jurisdictions are now looking at the option that we have adopted as a better solution. So it is better value for money. I said that we would pay for 2 years. Members may be worried that after that the cost will rocket. The current cost of operating these units is £5 a month. So it is not a significant, or expected to be a significant burden. I can also say that of the licensed vessels, as I said, about 80% have had or are scheduled to have the unit fitted. 5 are actually going to gain exemptions. There's a clause which we didn't discuss, but there is an exemption clause in the regulations which allows for boats which, for example, are unable to fit the equipment. That is principally if they do not have a power supply. So a very small boat which does not have a power supply will be exempt. We think there are 5 of them. So not many will come under that exemption. As to, I think in terms of the direct question, in terms of operating costs and breaking down, the equipment breaking down, I think the fact that the units cost £60 each would suggest that repair costs are unlikely to be great, and if they were, then they could be simply replaced. So with that, I would call for the vote. I don't mind how it's done.
Those in favour kindly show. Regulations are adopted in third reading. The next item is increase in revenue expenditure for agriculture and fisheries, P74, lodged by Deputy Luce. The main respondent is the Minister for Economic Development, Tourism, Sport and Culture. Deputy Luce, there are now 2 amendments, one lodged by you and one from the Council of Ministers. Do you accept those amendments?
I do, sir. As I said this morning, obviously I have my first amendment. The second one I lodged, I have withdrawn now. Consequently, the amendment to that amendment falls away, and I'm accepting the Council of Ministers' third amendment.
Thank you. Are members content for the proposition to be read as amended?
Sir, can I just check when declarations of interest should be made?
After the proposition has been read. Yes, Grafia.
The states are asked to decide whether they are of opinion, A, to request the Council of Ministers to take the necessary steps to ensure states' revenue expenditure directly on agriculture and fisheries via the rural and marine support schemes rises to at least 6.7 million in 2024 and increases in line with RPIX for each remaining year of the government plan, with compensating measures to offset the additional cost, and to lodge an amendment to the Government Plan 2024 to 27 to achieve the realisation of this target. B, to request the Council of Ministers to bring forward proposals to provide for the recapitalisation of the Agricultural Loans Fund in 2024 to a level sufficient to enable meaningful capital investment in the industry and not less than 10 million, including a transfer from the Strategic Reserve if there are insufficient funds in the Consolidated Fund.
Now, Deputy, as you quite rightly raised the question of declarations of interest under Standing Order 106, and members must now declare an interest clearly stating the nature of that interest, if relevant to this proposition.
And so thereby hangs the issue. My declaration of interest records properly together with my two sisters, a substantial block of land in St Saviour. It has not been updated, sir, because of the death of our uncle will be, but the declaration of interest is larger, but it's not that large. But it is, of course, the case that the well-known passage of any government spending in terms of subsidies gets capitalised in asset prices and rentals. So it's an interest that is hopefully not going to be that way, but can be. And I just want to make it absolutely clear that I have an interest in land, and I'm sure that other members with perhaps other business interests as well in the supply chain of agricultural matters. But it's a relevant issue, but it's held by a class of people. And I think it's just as the States is often talked about being landlords in terms of residential landlords. Here we have residential. Here we have non-residential agricultural landowners, which should be declared and openly. And I believe that it has been made. And I wish to express the hope that it doesn't get capitalised in land values, but there is the risk that it does.
Thank you. The next light, Chief Minister.
Thank you, sir. Likewise, 3 of the fields that are identified in my declaration of interest receive rent from agricultural land.
Thank you. Deputy Hegarau.
Thank you, sir. I own a quarter of a farm property at St Peters. None of the land is let, and I gain no income from it, but I just wanted to make sure that people were aware that I do own a quarter of a property, although I have no financial gain from it.
Thank you. Constable Greville.
Yes, sir. I also need to make a declaration that I have land in the parish of Greville, which I rent to a farm, sir.
Thank you. Deputy Alex Curtis.
Thank you, sir. I'm currently in the process of buying 7 verges of land, and I intend to be farming that as a smallholder in the 2024 season.
Thank you. Constable St Mary.
Thank you, sir. I have one field in St Mary which I rent, and I think the Senate reminding me that he owes me that rent at the moment. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Howell.
I, like Deputy Lehegarat, I own half the farm with some land. Thank you.
Deputy Ferry.
Yes, sir. I own 2 plots of land in the parish of Trinity, although they are not currently rented out, sir.
Thank you. Deputy Luce.
So I think it's right that I declare, as is on my declaration on the state's website, I am in receipt of a regular repayment on a loan from an aquaculture company.
Thank you. Deputy Tom Binney.
I wonder if it might not have been easier to ask anybody who doesn't have an interest to declare that. It would have been a little bit simpler.
That's not the way it works, unfortunately. Carry on.
In conjunction with Deputy Rose Binney, we rent land to agriculturalists, some warehousing, a small amount of staff accommodation, and we have a business that supplies a certain amount of equipment and machinery, though in relation to that business it's relatively de minimis. Thank you, sir.
That's Deputy Tom and Deputy Rose Binney. Deputy Miller.
So I also own a very small field in Trinity, which is occupied by a local farming family with horses. It's not income producing, and I don't expect it to be, but I'll make the declaration.
Right. Thank you. Anyone else wants to make? Yes, Deputy Landry.
I have a reversionary interest in some land in Greville. I receive no income from it. That goes to use for Triana.
Thank you very much. Well, this is not an interest shared with a small number of other people, which would disqualify members from voting. Accordingly, those who have declared an interest can vote in this proposition. Yes, Deputy Luce.
Thank you, sir. So when I campaigned to become a politician back in 2011, I used a 2-word slogan, and those 2 words were working together. And before talking about how our agriculture and fisheries industry have been working with government, I want to beg the indulgence of the Assembly to speak very briefly about the camaraderie and community spirit and the working together displayed by all islanders in the last few days. I've spoken to hundreds of my parishioners over the weekend, and those like myself who lost power and water for a day or so don't dwell on their challenges. They want to see what they can do to help others, even those parishioners of mine who have only had their power put on in the last few hours are grateful. They're grateful for all the help and assistance they've received, because we're all aware of others who are far worse off than us, and we all want to do what we can to help. I'm not going to single out anyone, sir, but the emergency services, honorary police, utility companies, states departments, private companies, farmers, charities, help groups, parishes, parish families and individuals. They've all been working together across our whole island and displayed some fantastic camaraderie, and it's truly humbling, and I would just like to say thank you to all of them for all the work they've done over the last few days. But sir, working together is also something that this proposition has benefited from, and over the last few weeks the farming and fishing communities have come together with government to work out how we can move forward in this matter, and I want to express my sincere thanks to both sides for finding the compromise that we have before us in this debate today. Sir, I thought long and hard about how to start the wording of this debate in the opening lines, and I stood back and looked at the title, and I was spectacularly uninspired, really. I read the first paragraph and thought, some will see this as scaremongering, and we've heard all this before. But sir, I want to say to members right at the outset, this is serious stuff, really serious, and if we don't act today, then the island as we know it is going to change, and it's not going to change for the better, and it's going to change really quickly. Our trees and hedges may have taken a huge backward step in the last week, but we can, and I hope we will, replant and rebuild. But our wider countryside won't improve, and our farming and fishing businesses won't have a future unless we take some action this afternoon. So right at the beginning of this debate, I want members to focus on and to think about derelict glass houses, the blight of our wonderful countryside and the proverbial blot on our landscape. That, sir, is what you get when you stop investing and stop supporting, and that's what's going to happen to our countryside, because we can see through those derelict glass houses what happens when a growing industry falls into decline. Do we want our fields and farms to look like those greenhouses in the future? Unfortunately, successive states assemblies over the last 25 years have presided over a reduction in the numbers of those working in the fields and on the sea and in the growing and fishing industries because of lack of support, and we can't carry on like this. It has to be us, this assembly, that breaks that mould and goes back to giving our countryside and our environment the support it deserves. The other thing I want to say at the outset, sir, is that everybody in here will know a farmer or a fisherman, someone who works on the land or milks cows or who derives a living from the sea or the seashore. And I want to say to members to take 2 or 3 steps back from those personal links. I want them to see the whole picture, our countryside, our sea and our beaches, our biodiversity, and I want them to suspend themselves 20,000 feet over our island and look down, because this debate is not about giving more money to individual businesses. This is about our countryside and our waters. It's about the whole picture and not about individuals. This is about finding a way to keep agriculture and fisheries in business, because without commercially profitable businesses, our seas and waters, our countryside will resemble like something we've never seen before, a real mess. So where do I start? How do I come to be here today? I'm here today because I was asked by members of the whole farming community and fishermen to a meeting, and as an ex-member of the agricultural industry and the aquaculture industry on the island, I knew things weren't good, but I'd never appreciated quite how bad it had become. We will know because some of us will have seen it in the media recently, our largest potato growing company is potentially in the throes of a takeover. That company hasn't made any money for the last few years. That's a company that has been shown more initiative when it comes to productivity than any other. I spent some time, sir, with some of our leading dairy farmers recently as well. And when I'm speaking to those who are managing business and are over the age of 70, or where the people running those businesses know that they can't find enough profit to employ a manager, or they know that if a tenant comes to take over their farm, that tenant won't be able to make enough money to pay rent or to buy the cows or to buy the machinery. We know that things are serious. We also know, sir, that if we lose another herd out of our Jersey Island herd, that the amount of milk going into the dairy will drop to a disastrous amount. So this proposition seeks to commit the states to providing guaranteed, and it's the guaranteed bit that's so important, guaranteed financial support for both our waters and our countryside in the years to come, because without this commitment, we will surely be looking at a different future, one potentially without those commercial farmers or fishers. And it may have been said before, but farming and fishing, Jersey's oldest industries, are on a proverbial knife edge, because in the last 20 years alone, we've seen arable farm numbers decrease from over 200 to barely double figures. The herd numbers of our Jersey cows, which were around 1,000 in 1954, have now fallen from 198 in 1982 to a level of only 12. The total number of boats in our fishing fleet reduced from 328 in 96, not that long ago, to 114 in 2021, down more than 2/3, and those fishermen continue to leave our industry. If these trends continue, then the export and local markets will very likely collapse due to lack of viable supply, and those farmers and fishers who are left will have an even less of a future. So when I was farming, I always believed that when it was introduced, the Common Agricultural Policy of the European Union was just unsustainable. The levels of money handed out to create the likes of butter mountains and wine lakes across Europe were massive. There were times when the very many millions of pounds and euros put into schemes to help farmers seemed absolutely limitless, and national economies struggled to keep up with the endless financial demands from Brussels to support European agriculture. But somehow, sir, the CAP has endured, and in 2023 it's as active as ever. The monies being given to support farmers across Europe are increasing again. Not only are the EU schemes ongoing, but this year each individual country will add further cash to support their own farmers. So the level of subsidised competition for our Jersey farmers has never been greater. Jersey, by comparison, has never kept up with the EU and other jurisdictions when it comes to support. Last year, our own financial support amounted to only £2.4 million, or 1/4% of government revenue expenditure. Back in '73, the states were allocating £500,000 to agriculture on an annual basis, and that might not sound like a great amount, but back then it was 4.6 of a £10.5 million budget. In '83, it was 5.2%. In '93, it was still 4.5%, or some 7.7 million. And even in the early 2000s, we were still allocating 2.5%, which amounted to over £10 million. That's in the early 2000s. And what I'm proposing with this proposition is to commit to a mere 6.7 by comparison, with an annual increase linked to RPIX. If one wants to look at how other jurisdictions support their industries per head of capita, then let's consider this fact. Last year we spent £32 per head on agriculture and fisheries in Jersey. UK spent £55, that's 71% more than us. And the EU, £118, nearly 4 times as much. Is it any surprise that our farmers and fishers can't compete? To make matters worse, and as I've just said, the levels of support for our competitors is said to increase yet further, with those EU grants being added to at a national level with new schemes. So it's now the norm to farm and fish with the help of government grants and with subsidies. So without the right level of support, our own farmers and fishermen are just not competing on a level playing field, and this has to be addressed quickly. Indeed, if it isn't addressed now, they will not be able to compete ever again. And the lack of direct support is just one reason. Other reasons include the cost of diesel, and I accept that prices are nearly 50% higher than they were this time in 2020. And I accept that diesel affects other sectors, and it does. But who else has to also bear the cost of fertiliser? Up 285%, nearly treble in the last 2 years. Plastics are immediately affected by that, and also the main contributor and one of the main reasons I am here today, the cost of increasing wages, and very specifically, the minimum wage. In the year to June 2022, the average earnings of workers in agriculture went up 21.1%. Across all sectors in Jersey, that number was only 6.2, and in the public sector, 3.1. In the last 12 months to this June, those average earnings in agriculture have gone up again, this time by 19.8%, at a time when earnings across the private sector only averaged 7.8. And these massive increases have mainly been because of the increase in the minimum wage, agreed in the States Assembly. The last 2 years have seen wage increases for agriculture, each of which are greater than any other sector in the last 20 years. Last year, the cost of wages and salaries for an official 4-farm sample, and this is a sample taken by government officers over 4 farms who submitted their figures, but their costs and salaries over the last year were 42% of their total costs. These levels of wage increase are unsustainable, and unless we act quickly, farmers will not be able to survive the wage costs escalating yet further, as we are proposing to do. And it's next year's proposals which are having an even more worrying effect. It's not another big step, it's another massive leap. I don't want members to get the wrong impression. I am not saying this is the wrong thing to do, and it's right that we chase the living wage so that everybody is paid properly. But if we accept it, the cost on the farmers next year alone from this proposed increase will be £1.7 million. £1.7 million, about half of the total industry support in 2024. Half the support wiped out by a single minimum wage increase. We know, sir, that the cost of the public purse of moving to that living wage is neutral, but it's certainly not neutral if you're a farmer or a fisher, especially in farming, where the vast majority of your staff are at or close to the minimum wage. The projected increase in costs of wages, social security and salaries from 21 to 2025 for those 4 sample farms mentioned, those farms will be losing about £1.5 million every year by 2025. And at that rate, they will be losing about that amount of money. And farmers can break even for a few years and still survive. But what they can't do is lose money at these rates year on year. Those aren't my figures, sir. Those are figures produced by government officers in the Department of the Economy. Some members may say that just throwing money at this problem won't work. However, I have to say to members, there are 2 sides to every coin, and farmers contribute far more to the economy than we might think. Those 4 farms, again, official figures, those 4 farms last year contributed £1.2 million in social security payments. They added a further £1.1 million to the economy with ITIS payments. Finally, they indirectly paid over £850,000 to the Exchequer in the tax on rent that they paid to landlords. The total input to states' coffers from those 4 farms, £3.28 million. When you consider that between them they only received £580,000 in support over the year, then you start to realise that farming contributes far, far more than you might think. The results of losing those 4 units would be a loss to the Treasury of over £2.5 million annually. And I repeat again, these are not figures I've made up, they are figures produced by our own economic department. But of course, sir, it is not just the quantifiable financial amounts that makes the real difference to our beautiful island. The vast majority of our hedges are cut twice a year by the farming industry. They cost hundreds of thousands of pounds annually. But it's the unquantifiable contributions that farmers make that sets our island apart from just about everywhere else. What price can we put on beauty? What's the real value of our brown cows in green fields? How many people come to our island every year because of our countryside and our views? Then add the publicity to the island from our 2 main agricultural exports, the Jersey Royal and the genuinely world-famous Jersey cow. Our cattle alone have done more for our island than anything or anyone else. Notwithstanding the Jersey cow population around the globe over the last century, they are now making a real difference to the quality of people's lives in Africa, and I make no bones about publicising this because I think it's fantastic. The D4D, Dairy for Development Initiative, has, since 2017, directly helped over 12,000 farmers in Rwanda. In Malawi, a combination of the RJA and HS and Jersey's Overseas Aid have trained another 10,000. In Ethiopia and Zambia, another 7,000 people. This initiative has moved the percentage of these African farmers who earn over $1 a day from 20% to nearly 90%. In Africa, right now, we are making a real difference to people's lives. While here in Jersey, our own dairy farmers are struggling to see how they can do much more than break even, or where the future of their industry lies. Yes, I appreciate that the standards of living in those 2 comparators are very, very different, but I say to members, let's look after our own dairy industry, just as we are helping to support those people overseas. So I want to talk very briefly about fishing, the most dangerous and demanding of our local industries. Our fleet is also suffering from the same pressure of wages, fuel prices and market challenges. Since Brexit, it's been increasingly difficult to export to the European Union, but fuel prices and wage levels have been the overriding concern. On many days in recent years, it's been cheaper to leave fishing boats tied up in the harbour than start the engines and go to sea. The size of our local fleet continues to decrease, specifically due to those reasons, and the total number of days at sea for our fleet is down 20% in the last 12 years. But more worrying is the reduction in those fishers using lobster pots, a fall in the number of pots being hauled, a reduction of over 25% down since 2017 alone. Our fishing industry is having to put greater and greater effort into catching less and less product, and it's unsustainable. Additionally, there are even further pressures coming over the horizon for our local fleet. Climate change is driving some of our traditional species, brown crab in particular, from our ever-warming waters. And at the same time, we have other species, spider crab and octopus to name 2, literally invading our waters and reducing lobster and other stocks. However, and far more importantly, the heavy restrictions potentially going to be placed on our industry by the new Marine Spatial Plan and subsequent marine protected areas may have a massive negative effect on fishing income in the short term. Only by increasing support to an annual basis and ongoing basis can we help our fishers through these difficult years to come. How that money is allocated will need to be agreed, but what is absolutely sure is the fact that without additional support, our fishing fleet will continue to decline. But sir, this is not just about throwing money at a problem. This is far more than a problem. This is about the survival of farming and fishing in Jersey. But the answer is not just one-way financial assistance. When asked, the public of Jersey have used these words to describe our island countryside. Again, official figures, but these are the words they use most often. Beautiful, green lanes, accessible and unspoilt. They also said that farming and fishing needs our support. In return for supporting our traditional industries, we get hugely reduced food miles. We get increased food security, and I'd like members to think hard about that one, given the weather and also the challenges of importing product from some of our traditional places. We here in Jersey, sir, have available to us a wide range of genuine Jersey products in our local shops. Crab, lobster, oysters, mussels, royals, milk and all our other locally produced dairy products and vegetables. We enjoy a beautiful countryside. We receive direct economic returns to the exchequer. Farming and fishing contribute hugely towards our island culture, our heritage and our sense of place. We benefit from, via the countryside and the seashore, increased well-being of island residents and visitors. We get so much more for our money than simple grant funding and support. Sir, I very much hope not, but some in this Assembly may say that we can't afford to support this proposition. But I say to those members, we cannot afford not to support it. Farming and fishing, our countryside, our waters, our whole environment needs our help, and it needs it today. I make the proposition, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Is the proposition seconded?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Does any member speak on the...
I wasn't in the Assembly, sir, but I'd just like to make a declaration of interest as an owner of agricultural land in St. Won, sir. None of it is currently rented, so if anyone's interested, sir, perhaps they could give me a buzz. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Farnham. Does any member wish to speak on the proposition? Deputy Alex Curtis, then Deputy Catherine Curtis.
Thank you, sir. And I'm speaking as well as rapporteur for the Minister for Economic Development, who of course can't be here as he's on an APF event. Sir, I would like to start by apologising to the Assembly for the point just at the beginning of public business for not being here when you called about the minimum lodging period. And I would also like to redeclare my interest as someone who is currently buying land, looking to farm it. So I definitely see a declaration needs to be made. Agriculture has been under pressure, and I think all members in the Assembly recognise this. Changing growing dynamics, heavily subsidised food import, and large-scale producers of covered crops being challenged by the mainland, not to mention planning for succession and fluctuating costs well above inflation, has hit the industry hard. I'm sure members will understand that challenge and the scale of it from what Deputy Luce shared in his opening proposition and his report. The Minister and I thank Deputy Luce for accepting the Council of Ministers amendment. This, as members will know, came as a result of productive conversations between ministers, the Deputy and the industry, and I think reaches a good position in which the industry, if adopted, can grow from. The amendment, now part of the proposition as read, addressed two elements. Firstly, it removed a tie of 1% of funding. Notwithstanding the challenges of tying any government funding to government expenditure that the Treasury Minister may wish to touch on, we do allocate, or the allocation proposes a minimum of £6.7 million and suggests tying this with RPIX. So there is no perfect measure as to how to project the onward forecasting of the support that the industry will need, and RPIX is not the perfect measure. Nor would the minimum wage be. There are both procedural challenges with that, the risk of influencing the Employment Forum's decision-making and the feeling that we would be holding down the minimum wage so as not to increase support. But it must be recognised that the challenges facing the industry often go far beyond RPIX and sometimes fluctuate out of line with other pressures. Fuel, feed and fertiliser have hit the industry incredibly hard over the past few years, and that impact has been a magnitude greater than RPIX. It is for us as a government and for the Assembly to keep a finger on the pulse as to what challenges emerge and what challenges the industry faces. So, sir, it is important that we support this industry as long as it is prudent and well directed. So it is important for us to thank the Rural and Marine Economy team. Their work on the economic framework for the rural environment provides us with a clear and productive mechanism for providing support and planning for the future. Through this, different farming activities are rewarding the farmer with different forms of credits. That can be anything from hedgerow management to the management of livestock, all the way through to being organic or leaf accredited. This means that when we are directing taxpayers' money to the industry, taxpayers, as we have heard, see the benefit that the rural economy brings, both for the food that we eat and for the landscape it looks after. And so this is not about just financial aid, this is about political will. I was at the Scoop AGM 2 weeks back, and there was fervent energy in the room about a changing tide about agriculture in Jersey. We are not purely looking at commodity foods or export markets. And we hear greater excitement about food systems, our resilience on island, and public health. These are all things we need to invest in, and agriculture and fisheries is one area we need to do that. So I would like to take off the rapporteur hat of the Minister and wear one and lean into some personal experiences, if I may, though. If the government wishes to put money in the direction of agriculture, whether that be through arable, livestock or marine, we need to address some of the structural challenges that prevent one of the most important elements of this industry, and that is of succession. For every farmer or farming family that leaves the industry, how are we creating the conditions for a new entrant, often members who will be first generations? I do speak, having declared it, as someone who for a number of years has just tried to do that. At times I have felt dismissed or treated as naive, but I do want to recognise the wide-ranging support and excitement from many in industry and out that there could be people who want to invest in the countryside. But sir, what in my view is stopping the island from turning a corner in growing agriculture, especially for the local market, is this support for new entrants and where they will farm. If you ask a new farmer or someone studying abroad who has gone off to hone their trade, in agronomy perhaps, where they would like to farm, many people would like to return to Jersey, and if you ask them which building are you going to do it from, that's where their mouth stops. If they've not inherited a farm, if they do not work on someone else's farm, they may have no opportunity. So our island plan asks farmers, new and old, to ensure we use existing land and building stock. It makes it incredibly hard to approve new buildings. The planning committee recently were shown a site by some fantastic organic farmers up in Trinity, with a recommendation from the department to not allow them a site for them to perform their organic activities with horses and preparing of grain. The committee that I did not sit on that day for that applicant overturned that, recognising the impact. But the scrutiny was on why were other buildings not considered, why were other sites not considered? And the reality is there were very few left, and those that were not open to them. We make it incredibly hard for new buildings, but we make it arguably far too easy to lose the existing assets we have. And if I recall correctly, it was the former chair of the Jersey Milk Marketing Board last year who raised this at the farming conference. So, sir, I should say finally that members might be confused about this form of debate. The debate asks for the Council of Ministers to prepare an amendment to its government plan. The reality is this is not the correct place to be having this debate. Members who wish to propose financial changes to government finances should bring their own amendment to the government plan. This places the Council of Ministers in a practically impossible position. I suggest this may be an area that PPC look into in future in standing orders around the lodging of amendments with regard to government plan finances. But notwithstanding this, on this occasion, I'm able to support the industry and through this proposition.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Catherine Curtis.
Thank you, sir. Just a few words about this. I think we all want to preserve what's best about Jersey, and our traditional industries such as farming and fishing are central to what Jersey is, what it means to us. Supporting farming and fishing will improve our food security, and that's something that's growing in importance, what with the problems of climate change and increasing international instability. With more financial support, our farmers can afford to pay their staff a reasonable wage, can focus on improving their product, and can look after the countryside. I'm sure we would all like good food, fields and trees, and improved biodiversity. For this end, we must support our farmers.
Thank you, Deputy. Comment St John.
Thank you, sir. So I'd like to congratulate the Deputy for the work he's done on this proposition, and also for having such a good campaign slogan in 2011, working together. I've also been very impressed by the constructive manner in which all parties have worked together to reach an agreement. And I'd pay tribute to all sides, including the officers, sir, who have worked tirelessly to provide data so we can make an informed decision. Only last week, sir, we discussed the lack of support given to the industry during COVID. This despite increased costs. Sir, colleagues were surprised at that, but sadly, it is a fact. We gave more support to a rugby team than we did to our agricultural industry, something I'm ashamed of. We've seen some frightening statistics in the letter that we received from the Royal Jersey Agricultural and Horticultural Society and the Jersey Milk Marketing Board, and repeated by the proposer about the small size of active herds we now have on the island. Sir, my family would have been one of the 373 with a small herd before 1973, and like so many local families, not one of my family entered the industry. I'm impressed with the work of some of our young local farmers who've engaged on social media. In fact, two that I can think of are grandchildren of the farmers who were neighbours of ours in St Saviour some 50 years ago. They're to be encouraged in their work and the communication that they're doing, as we need to encourage more people to join both our growing and dairy industries. Food security, just mentioned by the previous speaker, is a genuine issue, also mentioned by the proposer, not just for Jersey, but we've seen the recent events in Eastern Europe had an impact on global availability of wheat, for example. And only last week, we saw the reaction of some members of this community when they feared a boat wouldn't come in. Those who watch what is happening in the rural economy will have seen the real progress made in terms of productivity, be that in dairy or in growing, many manual processes having been automated. So I believe that the industry has also made great steps in terms of its employees, both in terms of pay and accommodation. Farming is a very different industry to the 70s. The standards that the businesses have to achieve these days are unrecognisable. Quality assurance, the environment, health and safety, to mention a few, are all needed to be able to sell their goods locally, nationally and internationally. Sir, my colleague, the Councillor of St Martin, paid tribute to the farming community during questions this morning for their efforts in recent days, something I'm sure we all echo. Sir, I urge all members to support the proposition as amended. Let's demonstrate to existing farmers, and probably more importantly to youngsters, that this industry and fishing is valued by the state and our community. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Conotable Greville.
Yes, sir. Deputy Luce, I must also congratulate for bringing this proposition to the States. I support him wholeheartedly and in this proposition. I would just like to add, again, after my colleague from St John's has just said about food security, and tell you a little tale. I was very wrong when I went to the ministry to talk to Deputy Morell about the food security we have here in Jersey, which I'm very concerned about. I told him that it would take 2 days, sir, for our shelves to empty in our supermarkets. How very wrong I was. They were empty the day before the storm. And guess what was still on the shelves at a very well-known supermarket in Rue des Prés St Saviour's? What was still on those shelves, ladies and gentlemen, was our milk. That's something to be proud of, sir, because we were still feeding our population at that moment in time. That's what I'm talking about. Food security, sir. It's vital, and we need to support this industry and this proposition. Thank you.
Right, Deputy Scott.
So, well, I have to express support for this proposition and yet a certain ambivalence, and I will explain why. First of all, yes, the farming industry is important to the island. There is an existential crisis, and I very much applaud Deputy Luce. You know, not just for the work that he's done on this proposition, but also for his incredible knowledge in this area. I mean, you know, if any of us are a member of the Economics and International Affairs panel, we chaired it actually, but you know, because he actually has so much knowledge in this area. And I very much, I believe that Deputy Curtis has made some good points. There's absolutely no doubt that there needs to be effective support given for farmers. But at the same time, where I have certain doubts, I will go through this, but let's go for the reasons support it. The existential crisis. All those things that Deputy Luce said apply. If we appreciate the countryside, we appreciate the roles of farmers as custodians of the countryside, then we have every reason to give this support before we see this slipping away. And their work in Africa is truly, you know, to be applauded, although I have to admit I am an inveterate scrutineer. I've asked some very searching questions on this, even in this, because I know how the industry struggled for support, and I'm always looking like, okay, are they people trying to divert funds that way? Not that it shouldn't have the support, but it's not really been properly addressed in the way that I believe many of us would like to see. And you know, I don't like it when people are just kind of talking about all these wealthy farmers and, you know, and all this sort of thing, when in fact, you know, when you actually look at the produce, working on very low margins, people generally will not pay a lot of food. They don't want to pay a lot of food for food. And I do find it incredibly, you know, a bit frustrating about the way that these subsidies have ended up going towards more and more being sucked up into the increases of the minimum wage, when there wasn't even at one point a contemporary increase of the accommodation allowance, just meaning that farmers had to pick up more. I do feel that that there needs to be a bit more thought given towards that accommodation credit, rather than this money just perhaps being diverted straight into the, you know, in one way rather than in another. But that's a different story, I guess. And I do believe, and one of the reasons why I really felt like supporting this proposition from the start were the merits of the fixed percentage, because we have one for arts and culture. And my sort of thinking there, excuse my cynicism, is that, you know, when government actually seems to be diverting money in areas that we may say are not such a great cause, which aren't so cost effective, at least if you have a fixed percentage, you can actually ensure that money goes there. But this actual proposition hasn't really been scrutinised in any great depth, and neither, to some extent, perhaps has the rural economy scheme. And I do believe that there is more work to be done. My concerns there, in terms of perhaps how the money is distributed, perhaps just some of the actual basis in which the subsidies are given out, the possible folly in actually the competing with jurisdictions that have so much more to give farmers in any event, and in terms of the economies of scale. But also, recent questions I've asked about the subsidy scheme. I mean, people have been talking about food security. I asked the question, could it be used to, say, subsidise the growth of medicinal cannabis as a speculative investment? And the response I got from the minister was, oh, well, at the moment the amounts are too small for anybody to do that. That didn't actually give me much comfort. So the support of fishing, I mean, we beefed up, we bumped up the support that was given there, but it wasn't all distributed. There's still some work to be done in terms of the giving of that support. So I will support this proposition, but I think there is a job for scrutiny, and I think that an overall concern that I have, as I keep standing up in the States Assembly, is that as we keep proving more and more things for good causes, as we see more money slipping away from through our fingers, perhaps without, in fact, I'm perhaps referring back to a point made by Deputy Andrews, without actually thinking, well, have we addressed perhaps an element of dysfunction here? Are we really ensuring that money doesn't get wasted on the way? So I believe there could be some, working this all through, putting in detailed amendments, that there isn't really the time for that. But there is some more work to be done. I know it's the responsible, to some extent, people look to the Economics and International Affairs panel to do it, or two of us, whilst you carry on looking at other areas that may be of interest to you. Well, we will do our best. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Joseph.
So I rise with some trepidation, being a deputy of St Saviour, where I know that there are a number of farmers in the gallery in St Saviour, and St Saviour is, of course, the dominant parish, I think, for cattle. So I applaud too Deputy Luce's initiatives, and he's bringing and shining a light on the clear reality of the what is called an existential crisis in agriculture. It is, however, not simply sufficient to really delve into the detail of this, except that there is detail. The agricultural industry is not a single industry. It has different externalities and different factors which affect each individual one of them. And so in trying to summarise what the position I think is, and I've come to the actual meaning of the debate and what this actual debate will mean, how we vote on it in the second part of my remarks. But I'm called to mind the great late Colin Powell, who in 1971 did an economic survey of Jersey, so when agriculture was certainly the dominant industry, with then a rising tourism industry. And he said, and his recent book published, I commend it to members, if they haven't read it, if they haven't got a copy, the book that he sadly didn't finish before he passed away, but was finished and is now published. And Mr. Powell in 1971, in the economic survey, pretty well forecast what the economic situation was. He wasn't a prophet, sir, but he was pretty jolly well right in actually predicting what would happen in our various sectors. And in his book, that when he reflects on that past, it's worth us reminding ourselves of what he thought. Because he says that, and I'll just quote 2 paragraphs from this book, it says, over the centuries, Jersey has enjoyed the fruits of a variety of industries. In large measure, all of the industries were the product of a combination of circumstances presented to the island over which the island itself had limited direct influence. At the same time, Jersey's shown a keen ability to adapt and change, and that basically explains the background of what we did in Jersey as we look back. And this debate and my my sadness, I suppose, in one area is the fact that we are looking back and not maybe forward enough. Because looking back, we can see dominant industries in Jersey of knitting, cider export, agriculture in all of its facets, tourism and finance. Mr. Powell explains in his book what actually the reality of it. For each of the industries that we've seen come and go, there was a changing trading climate over which the island had little, if any, influence. In large measure, however, the island has enjoyed good fortune that one industry declined, but another opportunity often presents itself, and as he goes on to explain why you should seize opportunities of the future. He also says that it says arguments for government protection of industries that have little relevance in circumstances. I would suggest that economists such as Mr. Powell would be of the view that effectively subsidising a dying industry is not what we should be doing. And I say that not to any way condemn our much valued agricultural industry to the past, because I think there's the word that I detested most from the last government was the fact that they called it a legacy industry. It isn't a legacy industry. It's only a legacy industry if you keep it in the past and you carry on subsidising it. And if I may take one issue with Deputy Luce when he talks about glass houses, I was part of the Finance and Economics Committee who made the difficult decision to withdraw subsidies for indoor glasshouse production because it was never going to be viable. It was an export that could never survive because we lost our ability to have zero tariffs of export of tomatoes. It was problematic in the 1970s with the oil crisis, and then it became completely unviable. And today, if we hadn't made that decision, we would be facing an annual bill, probably £2 or £3 million a year, just to subsidise effectively to make Jersey indoor tomatoes competitive to the export markets to the UK of tomatoes. And the problem is what we've done with the glass houses, which is nothing. Having part of the decision to withdraw the subsidy, give farmers 3 years subsidies up front, tell them we were withdrawing it, they were supposed to repurpose their glass houses. And those glass houses were supposed to be repurposed, and some of them have their garden centres, they're great locations, they're great things are happening on some, others have been redeveloped for housing, and others are laying derelict. And some got subsidies the 3-year roll-up, and others didn't, which is another problem. So I'm afraid to Deputy Lusso, I say, you cannot simply carry on subsidising something which is uneconomical compared to and that's the export industry. Now, our dairy industry is not an export industry. It is a domestic industry. We are providing and I'm afraid to say that I also take issue. I celebrate, I've been part of it since the start, the fantastic issue of the Jersey cow in Africa. But that's got nothing to do with today's debate. The dairy industry today is actually only more productive and profitable because this assembly allowed the importation of semen, of bull semen, from Jersey breeds outside of the island. So it only exists because we did a reverse thing, because the production of a cow in Canada or Australia or New Zealand was much more advanced than our closed herd in Jersey. And it's got a future, and we should support it. The Jersey royal industry is the thing that troubles me. It is an export. We all enjoy talking about it, and we all enjoy eating it on our plates, but it is an export. And if it can't stand on its own 2 feet without subsidy, being an export, then one really has to question whether or not it's got a future. In terms of the fishing industry, I completely agree with Deputy Luce. We can open markets. We've got a fantastic range of shellfish, and as the Minister in the previous proposition said about licensing of vessels, we've got a whole opportunity to basically open markets for what is a demanded product because the French love our crustaceans and our other produce from the sea. And they actually fish quite a lot of it and move it straight in without all the post-Brexit problems that we've got. There we have an industry that government can help and assist open markets that are good and profitable without subsidising them. Government support is about making access to markets open and making that work. It is not about about providing subsidies that are going to prop up industries of yesterday. And it's really hard to say it. People don't like change. They like looking back at the past and saying we want a great past but as Colin Powell said, a distinction to draw between the past and the present involves industries which the island depended on in past centuries is in large measure a single product and changes. He says it in his book. If you carry on pretending that the world hasn't changed, that those externalities haven't changed, you are going to create effectively an economy that is basically beleaguered, being unable to change and adapt and innovate. And that's what we've done and what we've proven. Now, what I would like to hear from Deputy Luce, can I just check the time limit, sir? It's 15, yeah. I thought it was 10. My memory is obviously failing. What I would like to hear from Deputy Luce is that he, and I must say, I'm troubled by the fact that I have not been part of the ministerial government plan discussions, and this is the first I've heard of it by the Economic Development Department, that they've got a problem with agriculture. Because we've been through a very difficult government plan process, which is government, we've had questions in question time earlier. We know that there's been a right battle between ministers to effectively cut the cake that's available, because we have available money and it needs to be allocated towards priorities. And I must say, I wasn't there at the table at the time, but where was the Economic Development Minister or his Assistant Minister advancing the case for this scale of money? It was 11 million, and now we're going to go and compromise with 6. I almost can't believe the fact that we're having a debate. 1 minute it's 11, next minute it's 6, and we've got Deputy Luce telling us today that it's today that we need to make a decision, as if it's a guarantee for the future. I don't need to ask a ruling from the chair, sir. This is a request of the Council of to the Council of Ministers to include £6 million for a budget that's only 1 year. It's about as useful as a chocolate teapot in terms of its certainty. It is not certain. If it makes members feel better that they've all stood up and said, we support agriculture, we want more money, they're kidding themselves. There's no guarantee. As the remarks of Deputy Curtis in his concluding paragraphs was accurate, is that actually, I think he conceded, sir, that actually this was the wrong debate today. The only way that this Assembly can make an allocation of money with certainty, and it now, because the last government did away with a 3-year plan, it's only 1 year at a time, there is no certainty outside of 1 year in terms of spending. None. I lament that change, and I advance the view that we should go back to multi-year guaranteed spending. There can be no guarantee to the farmers listening on the radio, to the fishers, to the dairy farmers that there can be certainty, because this debate is just a debate with no consequence other than a request to come back to the real debate in the government plan in December for an allocation. And I'm really troubled with the fact that we're having a pre-government plan debate, which is going to tie the hands of the Minister, the Council of Ministers. This really, I must say to the Deputy, should be an amendment to the government plan, because he cannot guarantee, because nobody can guarantee anything under the public finances law, any future expenditure. It is not possible. It's 1 year at a time. I'm the Treasury Minister who brought the multi-year, at least 3 years was better than 1, and everybody celebrated it. But it didn't, we now know not got that. So to suggest that this debate, sir, is the day that matters for agriculture, I'm afraid it doesn't, because what the Council of Ministers is now faced with, and I'm not sure, having only arrived back in partial office last week, that the Council is absolutely in favour of what the unintended consequence of this is, because our Treasury Minister has told us that with the consolidated fund available cash and the money having already been allocated, the only way that this is going to be able to be funded next year is a pro-rata cut of all ministerial departments. Now, we've got chair of the health scrutiny panel and other member of Reform advancing questions that maybe there's not enough money for health. Are they going to take a cut, fund farmers? Is Home Affairs? Is Social Security? The big spenders? I haven't heard agreement around the Council Ministers' table that they are. I know external relations is up to its, didn't get everything it needs. And if we want to open markets and help fishermen, I'm afraid we need to invest in our French relations, which is what we're doing. This is really difficult, sir, because this debate is one of those that is an emotional one that gives the impression of support, but is lacking in detail, is lacking in evidence. The evidence that is being provided is the wrong evidence by suggesting that we match farming subsidies from the places that get it wrong, which Europe has got it wrong. The UK might be getting better. I must say I've been very impressed by the officer within the Economic Development Department. I won't name him, but he knows who he is, because he did at least assuage my concerns that if money is allocated, if it's allocated, it is going to be along the lines of what should be allocation. And yes, I agree completely. We've got the Howard Davis farm. It was left to the people of Jersey for the advancement of agriculture. I don't see much advancing in agriculture at the Howard Davis farm these days. Today, it looks like it looked very unagricultural the last time I went there. If we are serious about providing a future for agriculture, we have to invest in a viable future. We have to be realistic about what we can do to help farmers. We need a separate strategy for the dairy industry, because that's domestic production. I agree that we need to do more. The arguments have changed. We can do more domestic production. There is a food miles issue, growing more food for locals. We've seen that over the last few days. That's absolutely right. The issue for fishing, yes, we can open markets. We can get hopefully we can get a Granville civet, so we can get sanitary inspections so our fishers can get their merchandise into French ports. But I'm afraid to say that I'm very concerned that this debate is not the debate which Deputy Luce is advancing, which is the one day which is a solution.
Thank you, Deputy. Colin Tarverson Saviour.
Thank you, sir. I will be brief, sir. In the last government, I was involved in food security, as was Deputy Luce. And there was some of the paperwork I've read on that was actually quite frightening. That the supermarkets brought in something they thought was a brilliant idea, and it is, as long as it works, called just in time. So you don't need the big refrigerated warehouses. It comes straight off the boat, straight to the supermarket, and away we go. But unfortunately, we found out with inclement weather that doesn't always work. And as has been touched on by the Constable of St John, the world is in a pretty bad way, and things will get worse very, very quickly. I hope I'm wrong, but if things do go south, we're going to need every farmer and every fisherman we can. If you think during the occupation, there was, I think, just over 20,000 residents left on the island, and at the height, probably about 30,000 occupying forces, and the really healthy farming community we had at the time just couldn't supply enough, and obviously the island was saved by the SS Vega. But we now have double that population. I think we're about 107,000 residents. So we've really got to pull out all the stops and make sure we do have food security and support our farmers as best we can. We've lost far too many farms and farming communities in the last few decades. I think in St Saviour now, I'll be corrected if I'm wrong, we have, I think, 3 dairy farms. And I mean, I certainly wouldn't want to lose any more. We really have to look after our farmers. Deputy Luce said his slogan was "We'll work together," and the last few days have shown that the whole farming community and everyone, non-farmers, all mucked in together to get the trees moved and all the routes open to keep the island moving.
So I won't labour the point there, but I will be fully supporting this proposition. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. I did think that Deputy Joseph was a bit harsh on Deputy Luce for the process that he's adopted in pursuing this. With this proposition, which it appears he's worked with the government to refine the wording on it to get it to a position where it's acceptable to the majority of us, is seeking an indication for what the States wants to see and give a mandate to the government to then pursue an amendment to their own government plan, which we'll come to later. And if we're satisfied with the detail as it's proposed by the government, we can nod it through. And if we're not totally satisfied, we have another opportunity to tweak it in the wider context of that debate. So I don't necessarily think there is anything drastically wrong with that process. So I won't speak for too long on this, but I wanted, of course, to put firmly on the record Reform Jersey's absolute support for this proposition. As Deputy Catherine Curtis stated before, about how this is completely in line with our values, not just on preserving Jersey's countryside and supporting that important part of our economy, but also the things that make it nice to live in Jersey and part of what's so special about our culture and our way of life. And everything that goes with that, with food security, that other members I think have put better than I could. We were very grateful to, on more than one occasion, meet with representatives from the Jersey Farmers Union to help them help us understand the issues underpinning this and some of the difficulties that they've faced. In particular, the two big ones that we discussed were support for new farmers entering the market, and that's something that members have raised, and it's good that that's firmly on the agenda to make sure the next generation of farmers will get support and be able to continue that important part of island life and our economy. But also the difficulties that they have faced with the ever increasing minimum wage. That is an issue that for almost 10 years now we have firmly pushed on to bring Jersey's minimum wage to the living wage on the basis of our principle that everybody who does a decent day's work ought to get a decent day's pay for it. And though we recognise that some industries will struggle with that, we prefer a solution to that which is based on a more generous subsidy model rather than not having a higher minimum wage, which has implications for other parts of the economy too, where that wouldn't be justified. So now to see that the conversation on that has moved on, and this Assembly, I suspect, later on this afternoon will adopt a proposition that puts that firmly on the agenda and sets us up for what will hopefully be a good moment in the government plan where there's a substantial increase in the funding that we give to those parts of our economy, that we'll be moving that conversation forward, helping them cope with the increases in the minimum wage and hoping to set them up for future developments as well. So we are firmly in support of this proposition and hope that the rest of the Assembly will support it as well.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Tom Binney.
Sir, I think I'm going to have to apologise to members of the Assembly and my former colleagues up in the balcony. I'd written a short speech which I'm having to throw away, and I'm going to have to speak from notes and off the top of my head, mainly as a result of the comments made by Deputy Joseph, sir. In Deputy Joseph, we have a highly educated man who gives us the perspective from Broad Street, and I'm going to treat the Assembly to the thoughts of an uneducated man who spent most of his time plodding around in the fields, sir. But I do carry with me a little bit of experience from the industry, and I can help to inform Deputy Joseph a little bit more about the tomato industry. And as I recall, we had a very good, very productive tomato industry, but it was all centred on one main UK retailer. In their wisdom, they decided to move those sales over to Spain, which that was really the collapsing factor for the industry. But it has to be said that 12 months later they came back to ask if the industry could start again because they couldn't get the quality of produce that they expected to get. But by that time, sir, it was too late. So I think if people are going to talk about the industry and make comments as the deputy has done, then there's a requirement to be accurate. So, and it's strange that Deputy Joseph, it's a shame he's not here to hear this, but he was a part of a government for a very long time. And if we go back 15 years, the Jersey royal industry was exceptionally efficient, and I have to say extremely profitable. But I do recall Deputy Joseph saying that he and his colleagues had decided to license a competitor to come in because the island needed competition, and competition we had, because it was one of the biggest companies in the UK. It invested against a local company. The resultant consequences were that we went from being highly profitable to both sides getting involved in a bloodbath, a multi-million-pound bloodbath where, because the new entrant couldn't make a success of demolishing the incumbent, that business went round offering huge sums of money to the retailers in order to buy that business. So the consequences were, in my view, near fatal. We may be in a position where everything may end up in the hands of one operator. That would need to be very, very carefully licensed, but there is an opportunity for the industry to become profitable again, sir, and I think that's an important point for people to bear in mind. It might also be worth considering that we draw tens of thousands of products and that get put onto our supermarket shelves for us to eat. So we're drawing from the global supply chain, and I think it's quite important that we contribute something to it. I haven't checked the figures, but I believe we're probably still exporting something in the region of 20,000 tonnes of very good quality produce, hundreds of thousands of litres of milk products, and all of those are premium quality, and likewise with seafood and shellfish, sir. We supply a lot to the local market, and we export some across Europe. These are all important things, and you also have to bear in mind from an economic point of view that 20,000 tonnes of produce on a boat going back to the UK saves a number of millions of pounds that would actually be added onto the products coming in to get the balance of payments right for their ferry companies. So before we take too much notice of Deputy Joseph, we need to bear those things in mind as well, sir. Actually, as it happens, my speech was basically repeating what Deputy Luce and Deputy Curtis have had to say, so I hope I've said enough to encourage people, sir, to support the proposition. Thank you.
Deputy Howell.
Thank you, sir. I urge everyone to support this proposition. It's really important to have locally grown, fresh, nourishing food, including vegetables, fruit, meat, potatoes, fish and milk. We need to support our farmers and fishers. My only regret, sir, is that we're only asking for £6.7 million because I don't think that's enough. I think our milk producers and our farmers and our fishers are really struggling at the moment. And I urge you definitely to support this, but I think it's a great shame that we weren't able to tie the government in, because if we don't have food, sir, we could all die. If everything closed down and we don't have any food to bring in, we are in a mess. So I suggest that we support Deputy Luce. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Lehegarat.
Thank you, sir. It's very interesting, isn't it, what people's different perceptions are of what we do or don't support. I come from a farming background, and everybody knows that. And I've, seen various things change over the years, quite significantly. And I don't know, because my father is no longer with us, but I certainly remember him saying that when Jersey was discussing whether we did or didn't go into the EU, of course, when the UK did, and we chose not to. And I think he probably perceived that as an error, because we could then never compete with what they were providing across Europe. And I don't know if my facts are true or false, sir, but this is my perception, that the UK joined the EU and the EU became bigger and bigger. And at that same time, we lost a lot of our agricultural exports. At the same time as I would suggest, we also started to see a decline in our tourist industry. They may not be linked, sir, but in my perception, they probably are. And the thing is that if we just leave things to just go south, so to speak, where will we end up? Okay, so we have a very good, potentially, finance industry, but will we always have a good finance and finance industry? There's nothing to say that we will. The interesting part as well is because I'm old enough and I've done a lot of jobs, I've also worked at the Department of Agriculture in my very distant past. And part of that role was actually on the Loans Committee. I used to assist the manager of the Loans Committee, and what they had was a system whereby if people needed help and assistance, they came to the committee and things were looked at in relation to financial loans. And those loans were given over a period of time and paid back. But also, and that was the point that was raised by Deputy Alex Curtis about new people coming into the industry. And we do have to be minded of, do we actually want to lose everything that we've got about the island, or do we actually want to do something constructive in order to move forward? I think also, as I said, there is a lot of qualifications that is needed for this industry. You know, they have to go online for everything. They have to do all sorts of things. They have to belong to LEAF. There's the Red Tractor. There's all of these different things and all these different obligations, and they all cost money. And as Deputy Binet rightly said about imports in and imports out, but I would also ask the question about when we're importing food, what are we importing? Are we importing things that we actually grow locally? And one would question, why are we doing that? Why are we bringing in food that we have locally? You know, there's always going to be, a balance with that. And the one thing I was going to mention, sir, and this is a total off-the-mark ballpark comment. We as a government approved hot meals for children in schools. I'd like to ask the question, where are the fruit and vegetables and the meat coming for these new school meals? Should we not be considering how we can actually secure that money that we've said is going to go to that particular thing to actually use what we have locally? And so therefore we're actually keeping local money within the economy. I'm sure we haven't even bothered, sir, because we all seem to want to have everything cheaper. And so actually what we should be doing is we should actually be financing things properly towards the agriculture, farming, fish industries in order that we can actually keep things more on Ireland and actually make them more cost effective for people to be able to buy them. So from my perspective, sir, I will support this. Yes, I do have a history in the farming community, but I do also think that we do have to recognise that it's not only this week's storm, it was the storms of 1987, the huge amounts of snow that end up drifting everywhere. Who clears all those roads? I think you'll find most of it's in the community, and that's farmers, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Honourable of Trinity.
Thank you, sir. I won't repeat what other members have said, but I think we can all pick up the direction of travel with this debate, and it's important that we do get behind our farming community and this proposition that Deputy Luce has brought today. And I'm sure that perhaps, I'm hoping that the right result will ensue. But when we leave here today, we don't want to think, well, that's a good job done, pat ourselves on the back. We need to think that this is the start of a journey which is going to see our agricultural and fishery industries reinvigorated, and people, and young people particularly, want to follow into this industry, because without those generations coming along and continuing the good work that has been done, keeping our countryside green, providing food for the table, that we're all going to be in a bit of a mess. This started out as a debate to provide 1% for support of agriculture and fisheries. It's been whittled down a bit by negotiation, and I think that's to be applauded, but not to think the job is done. We can spend 1% of what we do, we generate on our art and culture, but I think when push comes to shove, we can survive without art and culture, but try surviving without food on the table, and I think that's where we need to be heading. So please support this. Get behind the proposition, send a loud, clear message to the Council of Ministers that we want to start on that journey to reinvigorate these industries with as much support as they need for future generations. So thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy Renouf.
Sir, thank you. I couldn't resist standing to respond in a way to the Constable's comments because the job is indeed not yet done. This is in many ways an easy proposition for members to support. I think I can't detect anyone in the Assembly who would not want to support the farming and fishing community. I certainly do, and it's a particular passion of mine to support sustainable farming and fishing, but I recognise the contribution of the entire farming community to the island on multiple levels. But of course, the other reason why it's not yet done is because we have voted the sum of money, but we have not said where it is coming from. And it is very easy to have a spending decision when the money has been offered but not yet found. And I do not offer that as a reason to vote against this. I will support it, but I will urge members to remember this situation when we are discussing the government plan, because decisions will have to be made, and Deputy Luce may not find quite as much support if he were to be bringing a proposition here to cut £3 or £4 million off the frontline services or the education budget or the care budgets. These are difficult decisions that we will have to make in the future in order to support this. And as I say, I think the job is being begun here. It is an important job. We do need to support the farming and fishing community, but it is not a free hit. There has to be a reckoning, and we will have to find this money. And I think that is worth everyone remembering when we come to those more knotty debates around the government plan, and we try and find where that money is going to come from. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Does any other member wish to speak on this proposition? Deputy Rob Ward.
Thank you, sir. Just briefly, it's good to hear people talking about sustainability into the future of an industry that's so important, about food security, as we've all noticed if we've been to the shops recently and many, many times before. A couple of things I will mention. I think Deputy Joseph summed up wonderfully why we are where we are. He talked about the poor decisions, probably he may well have been involved in many of them, made by successive governments, as to not invest and to not look forward and look long-term about an industry on a small island that creates food that hopefully will be for a small island. And instead to create large industries and competition that can simply not be competed with because there isn't that support from our government, because there's a fear of government support for an industry on this island. There has been for a long time. And as we bow down to the altar of free market economics, we will lose out if you're a small industry competing against a much larger one with more subsidies, as has been explained today. And there is a simple solution. There are false dichotomies, and the reason I want to speak, sir, is there are false choices being offered to us here. We support an industry that's really, really important for this island, about food sustainability. We talk about education, about training people into careers on the island, into farming, into these really purposeful future points that we want for this island so that we can feed ourselves, etc., cut down our oil miles, change our carbon footprint, all of the things that we talk about so often. But we always, what we're given is a choice. Well, if you want to do that, you might have to cut education or health. They are false choices. The real choice is to have a fair taxation system. And we don't have that because for many, many years we have moved the tax burden from corporate industry, from those with the most wealth, to the lowest and middle income earners on this island. And you cannot have that form of tax system, low taxation for the wealthiest and largest companies, and sustain things the way we want to. And yet again, we come to it again in this assembly, that problem. There's where your issue is. We can afford to keep this industry going because we need to, because it's a good industry for this island, for diversity, so that they're not reliant upon one industry like finance forever. Because that does not make sense to simply put all of our eggs in one basket. But in order to do that, the reality we have to face up to is the inequity of our tax system and the tax breaks for the wealthiest, while the lower and middle income earners in this island are struggling to survive. So I just want to make that point so we can move on from this false argument that we keep hearing in this assembly. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Clive Harvison Brillard.
Thank you, sir. When I was towards the latter years of being at school, I always wanted to be a farmer, and went to classes at the Howard Davis farm with the late Dennis Shaw, who some will, I'm sure, remember, and got qualifications. So I fully empathise with the plight that the agricultural industry finds itself in, and am supportive of the Deputy's proposals. But having drawn to more maritime things, so I find myself just wanting to focus a little on the fisheries industry, which I have to say is at the moment, a parlous state. We heard earlier on about the reducing numbers in our fleet, and also, of course, in farming. We have to understand why that is. The reason, obviously, is because people aren't coming into either industry because they can't make enough money to live out of it. And there is a basic necessity of a certain amount to be able to live. And that has to be achieved so. And I think without financial support, people are going to continue to leave the industry. There are other factors which keep creeping in. We've got various propositions coming from the Environment Minister, which is, in the short term, going to make it even more difficult for the fishing industry to survive. And only one fisherman a week or so ago told me, he said, well, the fishing industry is wrecked completely. Was not exactly the words he used, but words to that effect. So I think we really do need to focus hard on giving support, not only just broadly across the pieces we're talking at the moment, but thinking ahead, focusing ahead on the younger people of the island, some who are not academic, but really lay well with jobs in either agricultural or fisheries. And we need to continue to create these jobs so that we can provide employment for the future. So it's not just about throwing money at the industries. There are a lot of consequential effects for which we will reap the benefit in further years. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Constable. Constable St. One.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to congratulate Deputy Luce on the presentation of this proposition and the depth of the information that he's given us. I think it shows just how bad the situation is as far as the farmers are concerned. And for years people have said that the government haven't supported farming, they haven't supported tourism and put everything into finance. Well, the tourist industry have been able to diversify, sell off land, build flats, and have done very well out of it and hasn't really affected them to any great extent. Where are we going to go with farming? We've got to support the farmers. I was amazed yesterday. I was at one of the largest vegetable farmers looking at some storm damage, and I was amazed when she was telling me that they're getting less money for their produce this year from the supermarkets locally than they were last. And she said, we're not taking a wage, we're not giving up, but they've got 8 full-time members of staff, and they are absolutely struggling. And I think that we have to support it, and I think that it's a result of previous governments not supporting the farming industry, and I think that we have got to do something about it, and sooner the better. So I wholeheartedly support the proposition, sir.
Does any other member speak on this proposition? Yes, Deputy Gorst.
Thank you, sir. I was just going to focus my few words on the technicalities. It won't surprise you, sir, you know that so I was wanting to refer to him as the Deputy of St Martin, but I can't do that anymore, unfortunately. The Deputy is an old hand and knows how to play the system. And of course he is, to some extent, doing that admirably well today by asking for an amendment to the government plan in advance of the government plan, and then asking ministers to go away and answer his question. That, of course, is allowed within standing orders, and your office will have agreed that this proposal is within standing orders. What that does, of course, is present a problem ultimately for ministers. The allocation in the government plan has been presented to the Assembly. Members will see from those allocations that the budget is finally balanced. That's income and expenditure. That's what we would expect. What that means, of course, in practice is that after this vote today, ministers will need to go away, and I think it will largely fall to all ministers in the Council of Ministers, but led by Treasury and the Chief Minister, to find methodologies of funding this proposal. And it's fair to say from my perspective that the funding for the revenue element won't be straightforward, but if we take it on a yearly basis, there might be things that we can do in 2024, but this is a proposal that requires funding going forward. Revenue ongoing expenditure is always more difficult to find than short-term capital expenditure. And maybe that's why we've got a sense from some ministers today. There was quite a robust discussion around the Council of Ministers table who have got their own priorities and wouldn't want to see their budgets reduced in any way to provide this funding. But there are no easy decisions, I'm finding, sir, in Treasury, and there's no easy way of balancing the public bucks when we have a set amount of forecast income. We always hope that income is greater than forecast, but we're criticised if it is. So be it. That's always a better position to be, because then it means that we can deal with short-term issues through carry-forward processes or allocations post the year end. But we can't bank on that, and we can't project our spending based on optimistic income forecasts. And so this Assembly rightly has to balance the bucks, which is done through the government plan process. I, of course, like the Sustainable Economy Minister, recognise the need for capital investment to allow for intergenerational passing of agricultural properties, to allow for new entrants into agriculture. There are a number in this Assembly, so that might be the first of generations that are not in agriculture in their families. And we see there, and we understand our own choices about why the family farm wasn't carried on. Because at the end of the day, agriculture needs to be sustainable, and that's not just sustainable from an environmental perspective. Maybe this is where I plough a lonely furrow, as it were, although I've never done that in my life. Milking a cow is a different thing, but ploughing a furrow is something I've never done. That agriculture, there's nothing wrong with us wanting agriculture to be profitable. In fact, that should be our aim, I think, in improving the support packages, that we should be supporting farmers to be profitable and increasing supply and increasing yield. And I agree with Deputy Tom Binney in that regard. That is what our aim should be, as well as delivering environmental benefit. Because if it isn't that, we are saying that our countryside has no future really in properly producing food and being efficient in the way that it is delivered. We are saying that it is cast in aspect, and that we're just concerned about verges at the side, verges, not verges, verges at the side of fields, and whether we've got a pond or two, and whether we're improving facilities for wildlife. And whilst all of these things can be good in their own right, it is, of course, some of these bureaucratic burdens that has led to agriculture being less financially viable. And so there has to be a balance there in my view. And so I say to members, it will be hard to find this money, I'll be in no doubt, but members I sense will be asking ministers to come back and find this money. I've been criticised by my scrutiny panel because the fiscal policy panel said that there shouldn't be, in their words, any speculative savings in a government plan. Currently, the government plan for next year has a £10 million value for money target in it. We know of the work that Health is doing to deliver 25 million over 3 years. And I must say to the Assembly that I'm pleased to see Reform supporting this proposition today. But I will take no criticism from them, so when they criticise me, if I have to, in the December debate, to some extent put speculative savings in the proposal, because time is short and it's difficult, realistically, to have fully worked up schemes of how we're going to provide this money. But we will do what we can, and I will do that with my fellow ministers, some of whom I know feel very strongly about where this money might be found from. And I see them all looking at me now saying, not out of my budget, Minister. But the hard reality is that there will need to be savings delivered across departments to provide this additional money. And that's why I also am grateful for the work that Deputy Luce and the farmers and their representative bodies have done with the Minister for Sustainable Economy in finding an approach that can be delivered and can support this continuing transition. Now, I say continuing because there's lots of farmers out there already using modern methods, using technology and doing their bit to be more profitable, but so can continue to support this transition so that we don't view agriculture just as some sort of cast-in-aspic protectors of the countryside, but we see it as alive, as vibrant, as producing food, of playing our part not just domestically producing food, but also globally into the supply chain as well. So one of my favourite times of year is waking up on a cold January morning and seeing the fields outside the window being ploughed and seeing the potatoes then in due course being put in. It's never the other way round. You won't be surprised to know that I am up and then farmers come along. It is always that I hear the tractors and the farmers at work in advance of that. And so we need to find that balance. But that industry itself, we know, faces challenges around disease and around the use of chemicals that it uses. When we come to that capital amount in the COM amendment, we have to be clear that it may be that we need to transfer money from the strategic reserve. We can't just hope that underspends in the capital programme will mean that we can allocate money into the agricultural loans pot, because that will have knock-on effects to other capital projects, and we know historically the States hasn't always been very good in investing in its properties. So I support the Council of Ministers amendment to the Deputy's proposal. I agree to go away and undertake the necessary work and become more unpopular with my ministerial colleagues. But it won't be straightforward. It may not be a plan that is totally thought out and with every I dotted and T crossed. But we will do our best, and I hope that at that point members will be understanding of why that is what we lodge. And I was also grateful for Deputy Ward's intervention in this debate, because he was quite clear that in his view of the world, increasing tax is an appropriate thing to do to increase government expenditure. And so we may see in that government plan debate proposals there to increase tax to allow for increased government expenditure. It won't surprise you, sir, or members of the Assembly, nor those in the gallery, that I will not be supporting that. I don't support that approach. I think that we should live within our means. I think that a low tax model that we have has served our economy and all sectors of our economy well in the past and can continue to do so into the future. And so I will be supporting this proposal.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Farnham.
It's always the case, sir, that when we're looking for additional money, it's difficult, and the Treasury Minister, who I fully support, so is very good at wringing his hands and struggling to come up with the money, of course. But they can, the government and previous governments, but mainly this one, can come up with money for ministerial projects, and of course, not forgetting the cost of cancelling so many important projects and delaying so many important projects has put new costs on taxpayers and islanders of not tens but hundreds of millions of pounds. So when you look at hospitals and health facilities and Fort Regent and other vital important projects and infrastructure improvements that had been lined up by previous governments, that have been cancelled, sir. And I wish sometimes the Treasury Minister would be as prudent when it comes to looking at the figures of the cost of cancelling things, sir, as to the excellent work he does and has done in the past in balancing the books. So against that backdrop and in the context of that, what we're looking at now is not a lot of money. And we have to continue to work harder on prioritising areas of expenditure. Now, I know, having worked in the government from 2011, sir, to 2022, that all ministers and assistant ministers want to do the very best with their own portfolios. And there are, dare I say it, pet projects that get over the line that perhaps are not as worthy of the prioritisation as something like further investment in agriculture. And I have to hold my hand up, sir. I was the minister responsible for that sector, along with Deputy Morrell and others, for a period of time. And I regret that we didn't achieve better financing or greater financing for the sector at the time, but we were working in a different political backdrop at the time. But over the course of the last government, so I will say that we did achieve gradual, albeit small, gradual increases in support for the farming sector. And in 2022, so we delivered the economic frameworks and the economic frameworks for the rural and marine environment. So, and I believe that should give members confidence, because they have provided a foundation for ensuring that the taxpayers' money we're going to put into these sectors will be well spent, with the emphasis on incentivising positive, sir, and continuous and secure change for the future. They set out these frameworks, they set out policies for the management of the Jersey countryside that embrace the responsibility in the care of our resources, in which all stakeholders work alongside government to support the wider strategic needs of the island, and in particular with regard to the production and supply of food, water security, the economy, and the quality, of course, of our natural environment. And we mustn't forget the work the farming community does on that sector, sir, which we all generally tend to take for granted, sir. And in the recent bad weather, sir, members won't be surprised to know that the farmers, in many cases, were first out on the front line, clearing up for us, sir. Farming and food production remain an essential element of island life. But in recent years, it has been subject to increasing socio-economic challenges. Business profitability is low in the sector, sir. We know that. And the significant restructuring that has had to take place has reduced the diversity of farming activity, both in terms of products and in numbers and types of producers. And that does pose a real threat to the future, sir. So government will need to work closely with the farming community and indeed all stakeholders involved in the rural and marine sectors, sir, over the coming years to ensure that the current fragile, and I use the word fragile because it is fragile, economic, shall we call them ecosystems that exist, sir, are revitalised and the sectors are able to attain goals of long-term environmental, social and economic sustainability, sir. These are industries that have been with us for centuries, for generations. They're part of our DNA, sir. And I'm surprised to hear some members talk about the unviability of certain sectors, sir. And some sectors might have become unviable because our exporters, our farmers and exporters are having to compete against heavily subsidised markets. And they have been for many years, sir. We've seen improvements to the social policies of our island, but that has led to large increases in minimum wage, in which we all support, sir, but we failed to provide the businesses that work in these sectors with the support we've promised them in the past. So I fully support this, sir. It's been a long time in coming. I'm pretty sure there's going to be strong support from the Assembly today, but I would urge members to do that, sir. And I think we can, when we look at the value of these sectors to not just our economy, but to island life, and as the insurance policy for maintaining our countryside, sir, and protecting and hopefully improving and involving food security for us. So let's take a medium to long-term view and start turning around. Let's reverse the fortunes. Let's make these businesses less fragile. So let's give them some hope and support for the future. I'm pleased to support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Does any other member to speak on this proposition? 1 minute. Yes, Deputy Garth.
Thank you, sir, and I'll be quick. I agree with all members that spoke until now, because I do believe that these sectors are facing long-term challenges, and it was a long time that these sectors were not supported enough, and what we are facing now, that they need very substantial support to be able to continue and produce and be with us. Now, where is my major problem? And I would like to say it here. First of all, I would really welcome from PPC or the GRAF to look into the standing orders, because it's one, but it's maybe not the last, that each industry currently experiencing really difficulty. I don't think about any industry, even finance industry, that didn't raise the concerns. If we have a process of the government plan, the amendments need to be brought into the government plan and not brought us back. It's happened, it's here, I understand why, and I understand that we have support of the proposition. And I would need to work with my colleague, the Treasury Minister, how he said we need to find the balance. Personally, I made it very clear. Most of my budget are staff, frontline staff. I cannot see how I can say, actually, I have extra 500 million, whatever is required. How it's important it is, but I think that children are important and I need to make these changes when we agreed, and I've made the plans, and now I don't feel that I can really find somewhere to cut. So I would be supporting this proposition because for me it's important, and we need to work together, and we need to find the balance, and we might need to work together with the industry to make sure that what are expected outcomes through the cost-benefit analysis, so how I'm to receive, what will be the outcomes. I know that amendment will come to the government plan, and hope we can work out magic and without cutting children, young people, education and skills budget, because this is where probably I personally struggle. But I congratulate the deputy. He brought the amendment. He knows exactly, deputy knows exactly that this industry need to have support, and let's see what we will work out.
Thank you, Deputy. Chief Minister.
Thank you, sir. I'm pleased to follow the Education Minister, who has quite correctly outlined the difficulties of finding this additional money, and particularly so outside of the government plan process, which is where we would ordinarily debate such important matters. But this has been a very positive debate, I think, in the main, and I would like to congratulate Deputy Luce on his opening speech. He talked about working together, and we just heard from Deputy Gardner that she too hopes that not only all states members but the industry also will work together with us as we find a way forward to overcome these challenges of finding the right resources for the right places, because this will be a journey. Now, in his opening speech, Deputy Luce talked about glass houses, and I could not agree more with the Deputy and the comments that he made. What I, for many years, have campaigned to find a way forward for those derelict glass houses that I agree are a blot on our landscape. And one of our major concerns last week when we knew the storm was coming was the huge risk of flying glass that would be potentially a hazard to anybody who might have been venturing out in the vicinity of those glass houses. I can say that the much-awaited supplementary planning guidance on offering a future to those derelict sites is very imminent, and I look forward greatly to that being published. Glass houses, of course, are one of the transition points of our centuries-old agricultural tradition. Another, I might suggest, apple crushers. I have a beautiful apple crusher in the centre of my garden. There's one, of course, on King Street, and around the island, a monument to a part of our history and our tradition of farming and how it has changed and evolved over the years. Because the island was, of course, as we all know, covered in apple trees before it was covered in plastic protecting our potato crop. And so everything is part of an evolution. That is nature, that is life, and we see that this is a contribution to, a financial contribution to supporting our much-loved industry to transition onto the next phase. And there's been much talk about the sustainable approach that is needed around this room, and I think we're all really aligned on that. And so it is now simply a matter for us to do as Deputy Luce has asked, to work together and to find a great and bright future for what is, we hope, an increasing community in our agricultural industry, and one that certainly I will support. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Minister. Deputy Andrews.
Thank you, sir. I think it is rather disappointing, having seen consecutive governments neglect our agriculture and our fisheries sector. And here we are in this position where Deputy Luce has been forced to bring a proposition before the Assembly to provide sufficient funding for those sectors. Now, we just need to look at how the government manages its own finances, and it has to be said, it doesn't do a very good job. What we do see is a continued level of growth bids being brought forward year upon year. We see headcount increase. We see non-payroll expenses also increase. But the essential services that are part of our economy are the ones who are in the minority and their voice has not been heard for consecutive terms that politicians have served in office. And so something ought to be done, but it ought to be done in the right way. And I guess there are several questions that I have in terms of when we are allocating funds for different firms in those sectors. We need to make sure that the monies are being prioritised and used prudently. What we don't want to be doing is stemming innovation, for instance, where we see subsidies being granted to businesses, and actually the innovation that could potentially be present is maybe then discouraged because the subsidies allow businesses to continue. And I would probably say to ministers, it's important that we do see innovation and we are more creative moving forward with those sectors, because I think it's absolutely essential that we are minimising government expenditure, but also in minimising government expenditure, we've got to prioritise and reappraise how we can best use money. And I think monies should be increased in these areas moving forward, because there really is an intergenerational problem with both of those sectors. As soon as you see people retiring, there isn't many people to replace them. And potentially that is due to the lack of financial support, so a lack of subsidies. And I think there should really be a long-term project that is in place to enable new firms to enter markets in those sectors, because what we really want to be doing is we want to be enhancing those sectors to allow them to grow, to also allow more food produce to be on sale for Jersey consumers, but also it will be a good opportunity to enhance our export services industry too, and to also diversify our export services industries as well. So I think that there is always going to be room and a good opportunity to do that. But I think having listened to several members, it's of course something of a concern in terms of where are we going to find such monies. Well, we have 48 million in growth bids being proposed, and part of that growth bid, or the aggregate level of growth bids that we see, is just going on employing more public sector workers and also just increasing non-payroll expenditure. And it just seems to me to be very imprudent because it's implicitly worded. Everything is in the government plan, and I'd like to really see a breakdown of what exactly is comprised within that 48 million, because as it happens, Deputy Luce has been forced to come forward with a proposition before us, when potentially it could have been the Council of Ministers who could have been increasing funding for those sectors originally in the government plan itself. So thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Does any other member speak on this proposition? I call upon Deputy Luce to reply. Deputy Luce.
Thank you, sir. It's been a good debate, and I'd like to thank everybody who's taken part. And it's been quite clear to anybody listening that this has achieved some cross-party support, the likes of which we don't see in this Assembly very often. I'd start off by thanking Deputy Curtis for putting over the government position, but also to the other ministers who contributed. And I'm immediately taken, sir, to the comments of the Chief Minister, who spoke about her apple crusher and the cider industry of the past. And I say to members, do you know the value of the UK cider industry last year? £3.4 billion. There's an opportunity. There's the innovation that Deputy Curtis is talking about. We can grow anything in Jersey. The problem we have is growing it profitably. The glasshound industry that we spoke about were world leaders in hydroponics. We can do these things, and that innovation can come from the support we're seeking this afternoon. So I say to Deputy Alex Curtis, yes, we'll keep our finger on the pulse of these future challenges, and we may need to move again. Deputy Howe, who's not here at the moment, was asking about even more money. Well, maybe that might be necessary, but we'll look at the way we pay for the credits, and we can change the way we administer that. And we do need new entrants, but I need to stress to members today, we need to continue with our large-scale commercial farms and our large-scale commercial units if we're to continue running these large-scale industries. Agricultural loan scheme is vital. That's guaranteed future support is vital. And I take the point about bringing this debate into a government plan, but I considered that very carefully, and in my view, I thought it was far too important to be lost inside those debates that we will have when we talk about the government plan later. Now, Deputy Joseph's looking at me very quizzically, and I have to say, sir, I was disappointed with his contribution this afternoon because I felt he missed the point of much of my speech and the evidence that I gave and I produced about the other jurisdictions that our farmers compete against. Because if we withdraw support while our competitors receive massive grants and loans, it makes us completely uncompetitive. And I would remind him, in the EU last year, every person in the EU contributed 4 times more than Jersey folk to agriculture. And look what happened to derelict glass. We mentioned it. When you withdraw support, that's what happens. But do we want to compete or not? Because if the answer is we don't want to compete, let's go home, close the door tonight and close the industry. Because what I'm trying to say is, if we're advocating a zero support future, by the time we realise that's wrong, it will be too late. The industry will be gone and it will not come back. And I say to the Deputy, he has got it wrong. I was disappointed the debate took that turn, sir. I didn't think it was necessary. This proposition has been arrived at with working together from both sides in good faith. And I don't agree with Deputy Ozer particularly, and I'm glad that the Treasury Minister reiterated that this is about moving forward and coming up with monies in future years. I'm not going to reiterate the benefits of the industry to the island or the returns to the Treasury, but I would say this, sir, for every £100 lost in rental income, if every Virgie on this island reduced in rental value by £100, that's £20 less to go into the Treasury Minister's coffers. And it's also £80 less to go into the local economy, because most of rental income on this island, would I venture to suggest, be classed as disposable income, and it would cease to circulate if it wasn't there. The Treasury Minister said it's going to be hard to find this money. Well, he knows what it feels like to be a farmer. I'm not going to go on again about the 4 farms that the government officers have sampled and the £3.28 million a year they put into the economy while only taking out £580,000. That's for every £1 spent, the Treasury Minister's getting £6 back. And I think that's a reasonable return on his investment. Those 4 units, if they disappeared, because we don't support them, will be a £2.5 million annual loss to the Treasury. Deputy Binay mentioned Harbour Dew, sir, and he's quite right. Every export tonnage that goes out of this island should, in theory, result in a cheaper tonnage rate for those importing. So every tonne of potatoes leaves the island should reduce the costs of our imports. On social media and other places, we hear every year complaints. We don't want any more big tractors in our lanes and on our roads driving far too fast. We don't want any more nasty smells from dairy farms. We don't even want any mud on our roads. But to those people who would say that, I say this: be careful what you wish for. no local food on shelves, no milk, butter or dairy products when the boats don't sail, no hedges cut, no honesty boxes in the countryside for your fresh veg, and no fish vans scattered around the island at weekends. If we don't support our arable farmers, there will be no vegetable production in Jersey in 2 years' time. If we don't support our dairy industry, then very, very soon there will be no brown cows in green fields or milk on shelves. And if we don't support the fishing and aquaculture industries, there will be no local crab or lobster or fish or oysters in our shops and restaurants. Our beautiful island will look a mess, and just like those greenhouses I spoke of at the beginning of the debate, the whole countryside will look not dissimilar. It won't be an attractive place for visiting tourists, and walkers won't want to come here. That will bring less demand for seats on planes and less demand for boat travel, so less flights, reduced connectivity, reduced demand for restaurants and hotels, so less demand all around, so less suppliers, yet higher prices, less demand, less visitors, even less flights, and then challenges for the finance industry because of connectivity, less people wanted to come here, the wheel starts going backwards, and it doesn't stop. Sir, I don't want to go there. I don't want to be part of that. I want to be proud of our island. I want to be celebrating our environment. I want to support our farmers and fishermen, and I'd like to accept, and I hope the Assembly will accept, that they need our help today. Deputy Renouf said the job is not yet done, and he's right, but the Constable of Trinity said we need to start that journey, and I'd like members to start that journey with me by voting in favour of this proposition, and I call for the appel, please.
Sir, can I point of clarification?
Are you prepared to give way and make a point
No,
of
sir,
clarification?
I'm not.
The appel has been called for. Members are asked to return to their seats. I ask the greffier to open the voting. Greffier, is the Conatar voting remotely? Just confirm that to me. Thank you very much. If all members have had the opportunity of casting their votes, I ask the greffier to close the voting, and the proposition has been adopted. 43 votes pour, no votes contre, and 1 abstention.
Deputy Joseph abstained.
The next item of public business is the draft income support amendment number 23, Jersey regulations, lodged by the Minister for Social Security. The main respondent is the chair of the Health and Social Security Scrutiny Panel. I'll ask the greffier to read the citation.
Draft Income Support Amendment Number 23, Jersey Regulations 2000. The states make these regulations under Articles 5 and 18 of the Income Support Jersey Law 2007.
Minister, do you wish to propose the principles?
Yes, please, sir. Thank you. I'm very pleased to be bringing these income support regulations to the Assembly for debate today. Subject to members' agreement, the impact of these regulations will be that income support component rates will be just under 20% higher at the beginning of 2024 compared to the rates in force when this government took office in September 2022. Ministers took immediate action last year to support islanders facing large increases in living costs, mostly driven by factors well outside the control of Jersey or even the UK government. This was followed up in January 2023 with significant increases in income support rates and additional income tax allowances. Today, I am bringing forward income support regulations which will give all income support claimants an increase in benefit levels in January 2024. It's reassuring to see that inflationary pressures are starting to ease, but all RPI indicators still remain well above the levels that we have been used to over the last decade or so. Jersey's low-income retail price index tracks a typical expenditure of low-income families. The quarterly value of this index peaked in March 2023 at 8.6%. It fell in June to 6.4% and again in September to 5.8%. However, given the rapid rise in prices that we have seen over the last year, I'm proposing an increase for January 2024 linked to that maximum value of 8.6%, ensuring that low-income families continue to be protected against rising prices. The estimated cost of the extra support is £7.9 million, and this is allowed for in the 2024 Government Plan. I propose the principles.
Thank you, Minister. Are the principles seconded?
Yes, sir.
Does any member wish to speak on the principles? Those in favour of adopting the principles kindly show. Thank you very much. The principles are adopted. Minister, how do you propose the regulations in second reading?
En bloc, please, sir.
Do you wish to address the regulations or merely propose them?
No, sir, I just propose regulations.
Are the regulations seconded? Yes, sir. Does any member wish to speak on the regulations? Those members in favour of adopting the regulations in second reading kindly show. Thank you very much. The regulations are adopted in second reading. Minister, do you wish to propose the matter in third reading?
Yes, sir. Can I call for the appel, sir?
When it's been seconded and when we've finished the extensive debate on the third reading. Is the matter seconded?
Yes, sir.
Does anyone wish to speak in third reading? The appel has been called for.
Yes, please, sir. Thank you.
I invite members to return to their seats. I invite the greffier to open the voting. Thank you. All members have had the opportunity of casting their votes. I ask the greffier to close the voting, and I can announce that the regulations have been adopted unanimously, 43 votes for and no votes contra. Now that concludes the public business for this meeting, and I invite the Chair of PPC, who I think is attending now remotely, to propose the arrangement of public business for future meetings. Chair.
Thank you, sir. The Vice Chair of PPC, Deputy Lehegre, will be presenting.
Yes, Deputy Lehegre.
Thank you, sir. We have a fairly tight schedule with 9 already listed items, and of course we've now got an extra 4 that we've pushed back from today. One of those has got 10 amendments. So I would advise members that we will be here, I would suggest, for the days that are allocated. So therefore, anticipate we could be here till Friday, sir. So I therefore propose the business.
Thank you. The business is proposed. Is that seconded? Does any member wish to speak on the proposal for PPC for public business for the meeting commencing on the 28th of November? No? The member's now content to adjourn till that date. In that case, the state stands adjourned until the 28th of November.